Mic check, mic check. Alright, seems to be go. Those of you who have tuned in early for our practice session, thank you for tuning in, both Twitch and YouTube. If you are new to the channel, both channels are under the same name, both the Twitch and YouTube channels. If you would like to rewatch the races post-race, you could do so on both the Twitch and YouTube channels. I have some pretty gnarly storms passing through my area right now, so hopefully it doesn't affect the streaming at all tonight. But once again, a pretty good sized grid. A couple new names, Pilantasa right here being one of them. It's going to be a interesting session. It seems to be, at least in terms of the practices, that we will be heading into the night hours as we continue on into these races tonight. Race 1 will be nearly at the same time as this. It will be starting at 9 p.m., which is right about 9 p.m. in-game time right now. And then race 2 will be at 5 p.m., so a little bit brighter, but it looks like we have some cloud cover. No chance of rain, but just cloudy, which does bring the track temperature down, so you will see some, or you may not see it, but there will be some tuning to tire pressures and things like that in order to have appropriate pressures for your tires given the colder temperatures or cooler temperatures. If any of you watch the 24 hours of the Nürburgring, which wasn't really 24 hours, more like 9 hours. Let me know what you thought. The Jimmy Broadbent crew ended up getting P2 in a race where they definitely could have gotten P1. But the race was over. They didn't have any say in that. They were the fastest car on track, but just the red flag came out after they had done some pits, and they just hadn't got that time back yet. Slokey pulling off there in a little bit of a hairy spot, forcing both Morton and I believe Bush to abandon ship. Riding along with breakfast, I think one of the only takers in the 911 GT2 Club Sport. GT2 car that you don't see very many people using. Not many people in any of the GT2s, to be exact. But that exhaust is glowing red hot. We've eclipsed the 30 car mark, and we may get some more entries, but so far looking to be a pretty good turnout in terms of the drivers registered. Zolder maybe not a favorite of some of the drivers tonight, but still seems to be bringing a decent crowd. Not very many takers of the Porsche tonight. I believe so far Breakfast is the only one in a Porsche tonight. And Busch bringing us down into the 29s, the sub-30s. Those GT2s, I believe on a track like this, will be able to exercise their greater horsepower over the GT3s. With these longer straights and not too technical turns, they are able to use their better acceleration and higher top speeds to their advantage. Especially on the long front and back straights. Granted, they may have a chicane or two in between them, but there is a lot of long straights for those GT2s to go hammer down. We will be, in terms of qualifying, if you have watched our Wednesday series, you see that we do a split qualifier between the multi-class in the Wednesday series. In this Sunday series, we don't do the split qualifier because they're all relatively close in terms of lap time. Most of the tracks, they will be pretty similar. This track, it will be, I believe, more of a GT2 strong track, just with the longer straights to allow those higher speed cars to exercise their top speeds. And something to watch in terms of GT3, while currently not on provisional, or not on practice pole here in GT3, Darnell in that GTR, it is a quick car. It has a good top speed. Would not be surprised to see that up towards the front of the order at the end of these races tonight. Mon showing some good pace. Currently up at the top of the board in terms of GT3. Driver that we have seen increasing in pace a lot in this Sunday series. I believe finishing in either third or fourth in the last round at Zandvoort, and looking to potentially be on for some good finishes tonight here in GT3. Definitely showing that Aston Martin has some pace. Slokey, one of our newcomers. First race was at Zandvoort a couple weeks ago. Currently in P2 in practice. Darnell, one of your top contenders in the Wednesday KTM series, with the clean sweep this past week at Brands Hatch, down in P3 in GT3. But they are all filling in the gap between the leading Busch and Wagner in P2 and GT2. Busch always showing some great pace. Always somebody that we typically see at the front row. And if not on pole, he's very close to it. We'll see if Mott bringing that gap down to less than 2/10 behind Busch. This isn't qualifying yet, but he's definitely showing that he is willing to put up a fight against Busch, and he is pushing in that Aston Martin. Showing some great pace so far. And if it happens to be your first time tuning into TRC with us, and you would like to race with us, I believe I need to get a new Discord link, but I can get you a Discord link, or you can go onto SimGrid and search the Racing Club, and we can get you into one of the series. We host USA Series, EU Series, and Intercontinental Series, as well as time trials and some fun events every now and then. And we do have some longer endurance races coming down the pipeline. They're just not here yet. As Mott pulls over to take that car into the pit lane, and I assume get some fresh tires, get some fresh fuel, or just take a break. He has been running good laps. Hopping on with Moreira as they're coming out, but Jennings ready for Moreira to get going, almost makes contact into the rear of that Ferrari. Looking to be some close racing tonight. The grid seems to be fairly close from P1 down to P14 within 2 seconds, and I can only expect those times to drop. But regardless of whether or not they may be fighting at the front, there will definitely be fighting all down the order. As Flatman shows us some big sparks out of the bottom of that Bentley. Flying his Welsh colors on that Union Jack liveried Bentley Continental GT3. A car that I greatly wish would come back to the GT racing scene, but sadly Volkswagen Auto Group has decided that Bentley is not a racing brand anymore. But oh, how I wish for the boats to be back on the track. About 15 minutes left in this practice session before we get on to qualifying. It is going to be a single session 15-minute qualifier, not a split qualifying like we have in our other Wednesday series, as Davis sends that elf sign absolutely flying. The signs are not being respected very much. You'd think we were at Paul Ricard with the way that we are hitting the scenery here tonight. But I would expect no different in the races. I believe that it would be a bad day to be a trackside sign. And these drivers show that they are capable of doing some close racing. Looks like they were nearly snaking like it's the Indy 500 down the pit straight. Through the long right-hander of turn 2. A lot of 90-degree angles here at this track. Very few obtuse or acute turns. Everything is more or less a 90-degree turn. And if it's not 90 degrees, it's pretty close to it. This is a track full of a lot of straightaways and chicanes. Those chicanes can make things pretty dicey when it comes to making moves on other drivers, as we will see people getting very, very close to each other. And I can only imagine that we will try 2 by 2 through some of these chicanes where 2 cars do not fit, but you are if you no longer go for the gap, then you are no longer a racing driver, so if gap car, as they would say. Pretty diverse selection of cars. Like I said, Breakfast seems to be the only Porsche out there. We got a couple of KTMs, transplants from our KTM series that we are running right now on Wednesdays, which has been a great series. The Maserati Madness Part 1 and KTM Cannonball Part 2 have both been great racing series so far. Riding along with Wagner as he goes wide at turn 1, which I believe will invalidate the lap. It will, but it's practice. There's always more time for practice. Hopping on with Craters in the Audi GT3. We have a couple Audi GT2s, but I believe that Craters is the only one in the Audi GT3. And as I suspected earlier, once those GT3 drivers started to pick up their pace a little bit, we do see them start to bridge that gap between the GT3s and the GT2s, as they have displaced a lot of the GT2 or GT3 drivers in the overall order. Just about 10 minutes left in this session. I will be right back just before we get ready to transition to our qualifying session. Alright, we got about 5 minutes left in this practice session before we get ready to head on over to qualifying. And still, overall, looking like a pretty tight group. Busch and Mott, the outliers in their class. But from then on, the gaps between the drivers, specifically between those drivers from 3rd overall to, say, all the way down to 14th, 15th overall, so about 11 spots there, all those drivers within a second of each other in terms of lap time, which could lend to some great mid-pack battles in these two races that we have tonight. Mott still leading the class in the GT3 class, and Busch now dropping down into the 28s in GT2. Definitely seeing some great pace, especially from Busch, but we always see good pace from Busch. We are just over halfway through this season, but some big tracks up on the order as we continue on. We have Bathurst next week, followed by Kyalami, and then the finale at the Nürburgring. I am not sure if it's the Nürburgring Nordschleife or the regular Nürburgring, but both will be good racing regardless. Just a couple minutes left in this practice session before we get started with qualifying and get the festivities kicked off tonight. Busch done for now. Not a ton of diversity in the GT2 field. Mostly Maseratis and Audis up at the top of the charts. There are some KTM GT2s, transplants from the Wednesday series, that we should see move up in the order. But still over 30 cars in this series. A good turnout so far. Or 30 cars in this race tonight. There's, I believe, 60 cars registered in the series. And this series does tend to be the one that brings the new drivers. Once again, if you are interested in racing in these series or any of the other multitude of series that the TRC leagues offer, find them on SimGrid or join the Discord to get access to those, which will also have the SimGrid links. Everything is on SimGrid. But if you're interested in joining, go on SimGrid, find what races they are running, what they are lining up next, if there's a new series coming up. Next week, next Friday, is the preseason round of the Summer GT3 series with a little bit longer races, some pit stops, pit strategy. And that also uses official liveries, as it's to mimic as best we can the SRO official series. as the drivers come across the line to start their final laps of practice. As somebody sounded like they were spinning just behind us. I believe it was the 24 car. But now as the clock rounds down to 0, it will be left to those drivers on track to finish their laps, and then practice will be over. Mott nearly making contact with Moreira. Moreira went to the pits, and Mott ended up going into the wall trying to avoid them when he really didn't need to swerve at all, but it happens. Car number 7 next across the line, that is Harrell. Car number 16 of Mikey coming across to finish his practice session. As he pulls over to the left, and then car number 87 of, I believe, Rowan will be the next across. And that it is, and then Harrell, the lone car coming down the back straight, heading now just into the final chicane. We can barely hear him in the distance as he comes to roar across the line and to set his final lap, and that will send us into our qualifying session. As I get my cameras set up. And qualifying is a go. Busch first in the pit lane, first to get out. First to get into that clean air, was on the front row or at the top of the timing board all through the practice session. We know that he's got good pace. I believe he would be the favorite for the pole here in GT2. And then in GT3, it could be a toss-up, but Mott and that Aston Martin showing some great pace. We will see how the GT2s do in terms of lining up close to Busch. Busch is showing to have some outlier pace in this series. And as the rest of the field cycles through, if you look down on that mini-map on the bottom right hand of your screen, you will see that there are a lot of cars competing for track position. And you can see why Busch was so eager to get out there in front, because aside from a couple stragglers here and there, he really doesn't have anyone to contend with in terms of track position. He's got clean air, and he should have at least one lap with almost no traffic. We have a little bit of a collision between 269 and 24, I think. 24 of Cook, 269 of Baum. And Busch makes it out ahead of the majority of the traffic coming out of pit lane, and he will have open air, clean track to at least set one flying lap as long as he can keep it valid. Car number 59 with an issue. It may just be off the track or letting the traffic cycle through. As Busch comes across the line to set the pace, at least for the GT2s. We'll see how it looks for him. We've seen him down into the 28s. We'll see if he can do that on the first lap. 29 shows to be good pace. What is it going to be for Busch as he comes across the line? It is a 29.2 a good lap, just a couple tenths off of his personal best in the practice session, and he will go for one more. Darnell setting the pace for the GT3s, about a second off of Busch, right at a 1:30.3. And then it is GT2s all behind him. Still waiting for the field to set valid laps. Some drivers having some issues, maybe getting the tires warm or just getting used to the car, getting the car warmed up. But we will start to see more times populating the boards as Kelta goes up into P2 in GT3. Kelta and Mont, if you remember, if you were with us at the Zandvoort race a couple weeks ago, Kelta and Mont had an absolutely astonishing battle for pretty much the entirety of the race that came down to a photo finish between the two. Could potentially be seeing similar runnings from them tonight. Darnell looking to set another lap. Craters with a car in front of him taking out one of the boards on the side. I believe that is Jennings in the KTM GT2 doing that. But Craters moves up, albeit by just a couple hundredths of a second, just under a tenth. Craters moves up into the provisional pole position in GT3. Slokey now dethroning Craters. Actually, I believe I had that backwards. Darnell was still ahead of Craters, but Slokey now, again, less than a tenth ahead, but Mott, as I said, bringing out the pace. Mott into the 29s. The first GT3 into the 29-second range. Definitely showing great pace in that Aston Martin. And could be on for a win tonight. I don't believe that he's gotten a win in this series so far, but he's showing great pace. Definitely going to be one to watch. We'll see if any of the other GT3 drivers can dethrone him. Slokey, one of our newer drivers, definitely showing that he's got some pace. Had a little bit of bad luck when we were at Zandvoort a couple weeks ago. That was his debut race with us in TRC, I believe. And we will see if he can maybe bring a fight to Mont. Still waiting for some of our GT2s to displace some of those GT3s, as I believe Busch won't be starting up at the front all by himself in GT2. But just have to give it some time. Almost halfway through this qualifying session, and Busch in a league of his own in GT2 with 4 GT3s spreading the field as Slokey now displaces Busch up into provisional pole and overall pole. As it's only a couple hundredths of a second, but Busch is currently in P2. It's going to be a race to see who will be the first to set a lap in the sub-28s, as I can only assume Busch is working on that right now. He does have some traffic in front of him to negotiate. Harrell up into P4. Mikey up into P4 now, actually. Very close between. It's actually looking to be a pretty competitive field here at the front. We are seeing times being moved all up and down the timing board. And every time that I go to say someone's ahead of someone else, someone runs a faster lap. Mikey showing some pace that we haven't seen very much of in the Maserati, or not in the Maserati, in the Mercedes GT2s. It's been mostly an Audi, Maserati, and KTM show in GT2. The Porsche and the Mercedes not really bringing much to the fight, but Mikey showing that the Mercedes has pace as Darnell now moves up into P4 overall, but P3 in GT3 as Martin sliding, I believe, that Ferrari behind Mikey there. Over halfway through this qualifying session, and we will see what these drivers have left. Busch now back up on the provisional pole, not quite into the 28s, but a low, very low 29. Slokey still P2, Mott still P3. Mott on a valid lap coming across the line. We'll see if he'll improve. Mott will not improve on that lap. He will have a couple more to try and retake that pole position. Pole position would be huge for Mott here, as I believe he has not been on the podium in this Sunday series, but showing great pace out of that Aston Martin. Slokey now coming through one of the second chicane on the course. Then down to the acute right-hander before you begin the run back to the start-finish line. Slokey, Mott, DeHaro up into P3, displacing a couple of those GT3s down a spot. Slokey with Busch in tow, looking to set a faster lap. Both of these drivers are your class leaders right now. As Slokey does not improve, will Busch improve? Busch will not improve. Running laps about a minute and a half, which means they will have, I believe, 3 more laps left. 4 if they can make it back in time. So 3 or 4 more laps for these drivers to improve their times. Still not seeing any times down into the 28s yet. Mikey down to P6 overall, but still up in P3 in class. Something you'll notice about that Mercedes compared to, say, a GT3 Mercedes, which I don't believe we have any running tonight, but it is a smaller car, much more narrow, not as wide offset as the GT3s or as that KTM you can see riding just behind. Actually, that's not a KTM, that's a Maserati, but still. And Mikey loses it coming down the hill. And I believe he will take that car back to the pit lane. Slokey on a valid lap, looking to improve. Will improve. He will knock a 10th off of his time, but it is not enough to improve positions. Busch just came across the line, also did not improve, still just above his 1 minute 28 second mark. He dropped down into the high 28s. We'll see if he can do it again. I believe he can. Actually, as Mott showing that he is going to be the first one into the 28s with a 28.9, displacing both Busch and Slokey down a spot. Mott showing blistering pace in that Aston Martin, showing us that he did not come to play. He came to win tonight. Also, hello to the YouTube chat. Thank you for tuning in. Just a couple minutes left, just a couple laps left. Busch, we know that he can run the 28, but he has to put it together in the qualifying session. Will he be able to? He's on a clean lap now with Harrell in tow. It's not necessarily a clean track ahead, as he does have some traffic that he would be catching. As Busch comes across the line, it will improve by just 0.02 of a second, will not knock him down below the 29-second threshold. Mott, still your overall leader, as he comes into the pit lane with a practice pit stop. We are not pitting tonight, but a practice pit stop, definitely good to practice if you, say, get a speeding penalty or have an emergency pit stop for some damage or new tires. Mott, P1 and GT3. Slokey here, P2 and GT3, looking to displace Mott. Will not improve on that lap. Busch, P1 and GT2 with DeHaro, who is done in qualifying, currently in P2 in GT2. Busch looking to displace Mott. Mott is done. Mott says, I've done all I can, and I will not try to improve. Busch will try to demote Mott to just the GT3 pole, as Busch would like to have the overall pole, but I'm extremely surprised. I fully expected the GT2s to have an outright advantage over the GT3s with the long straights that we have here, but the GT3s show that they are willing to play. They are close in contention to the GT2s. Busch has one more lap left to try to improve, and we will see if he continues on this lap. Mott looking to be in a good spot for the overall pole so far. Busch comes out of turn 2, down into turn 3. The long run before the tight chicane, I believe the tightest chicane on the track, and it's got a little bit of an awkward exit. It's completely clambering over the curves, all 4 tires in the air. Is the lap still valid? It is. He is still on it, pushing that car to the absolute limit. We'll see if Busch can improve as he abandons the lap. That will be it. Mott will not be displaced by Busch, but it does not mean that it can't be done by somebody else. Darnell comes across the line, not yet. Darnell coming through the penultimate corner and final corner, the final chicane. Still pushing on this lap. Will he improve? He will improve slightly, but it is not enough to displace DeHaro. Darnell will be starting on the 3rd row, as long as no one else can improve ahead of him. Car number 12 of Norman will be your next across the line. And then it will be Cook, and then Mikey, and then 103 of Bird. Norman across the line. Improves up into P19. Cook next across the line. P13. Mikey. P7 finishing spot. Car number 91 on an invalid lap. Car number 51. Who is car number 51? That is Davis, not improving. Car 256, not improving. And the order is set. In GT2, Busch, your pole sitter, pretty much usual business there, but he is not the overall pole sitter. Busch P1, Harrell P2, DeHaro P3, Mikey P4, Bird P5, Drain P6. Wagner P7, Harvey P8, Rowan P9, Breakfast P10, Winter P11, Jennings P12, Poplinski P13. Mott with his first pole position of this season, I believe, with Slokey in tow, just a couple tenths behind in P2. Darnell P3, Kelta P4, Craters P5, Davis P6, Cook P7, Alarcon P8, Van Wyck P9, Eggy P10, Merkel P11, Norman P12, Moreira P13, Ditto P14, Schmidt P15, Baum P16, Flatman P17, Pilontasa P18, Morton P19, and Saba. I believe Saba was a late entry starting at P20, but he is one of those drivers that I would watch and look out for, as he will likely be on a hard charge to the front of the field. Granted, he has enough time and luck to make it there. Saba with the late entry, but definitely one to watch. He is an absolute monster in the Lamborghini, and I was surprised not to see him, but he has made it. Saba will definitely be one of the stories tonight. As we are lined up on the grid for race 1, it is a 9 p.m. start, so we are going to be with lights on. This is a 30-minute sprint, and then race 2 will be another 30-minute sprint, but it will be starting earlier. It will be starting at 5 p.m. But the drivers are lined up on the grid, and we will be rolling here in about 2 minutes. Mott, starting on the front row, he has the advantage into turn 1, but is not at an advantage into turn 2. So race start is going to be crucial because he needs to get ahead of Slokey there in that Ferrari just behind, but he needs to hold on to both the apex of turn 1 and the apex of turn 2 in order to get the position locked down so he can run away and exercise his better pace over the rest of the field. Busch doesn't have too much GT2 traffic behind him. Actually, he does have Harrell starting just behind him with DeHaro following close behind. As I will get my replay cameras set up. We'll see what camera we like. We will try this camera. As the grid is lined up, very colorful. A lot of different paint schemes in the field. As I will get back on our leaders in about 45 seconds, we will be engines fired. And Mott will be the one to lead us off the line to start our formation lap. On board, clear traffic ahead, but if you look behind, there is quite a bit of traffic behind. Something to watch out for is going to be Saba. He has a long way to go to get caught up with the rest of this field. As we will be engines fired here in just a second. You'll see the lights come on the front of those cars. And we will be rolling here. There you go. There's the lights, and we get some flashers going as everyone fires up those engines, and the grid lights up and roars to life. You can't see them just yet, or can't hear them just yet, but as we get rolling, you will see them come our way. It's a very mixed bag field between the GT3s and the GT2s, shuffled all the way down the order, but they will kind of, I believe, set their paces as we get going. And Mott leading us off the line. As we head down to turn 1. Something that you will see all of the cars doing tonight is weaving. They are trying to generate tire temperature. The GT2s, one of the big differences between the GT2s and the GT3s, the GT2s don't have tire blankets, don't have tire warmers. So something you'll see the brake lights lit up on those GT2s. For one, they're building up brake temperature, but they are also going to be weaving and generating some tire temperature, but having that brake temperature also helps warm the tires, as the brakes obviously are very close to the tires. As we have someone, I believe 2 drivers starting in pit lane, that is Baum and Kelta. Kelta starting in pit lane, someone that we see usually fighting with Mott. It was Mott and Kelta last time we were at Zandvoort in this series that had that amazing battle all the way through pretty much the entire duration of the race. As they head down to the second chicane. Very, very slow. I don't see much weaving just yet. Not as much as I was expecting, but I believe we may see it the closer we get to the start-finish line, the closer we get to race start. since there is a lot of straights on this track, those tires would cool pretty quickly, so they may be saving their temperature generation to the start-finish line. As we head down the acute right-hander that gets us towards the pit straight and the start-finish line, we should get the 2x2 call here very shortly, and I believe we have got it now. As Mott on the left with Busch on the right, Slokey on the left, Harrell on the right. It is GT3 in front of GT3 on the left and GT2 in front of GT2 on the right. And as Mott leads them to the line, a race start is crucial here, as they are creeping up towards the start-finish line. Some flashers telling us that they are ready to go, as we are about to take the green flag. Green, green, green. We are racing here in race 1 of the TRC Sunday Multiclass Series, as Busch gets the better run off the line. Mott is going to be at the disadvantage, as both Busch and Harrell have the inside line on Mott. Slokey may be trying to follow both of those drivers through, as Slokey will nearly have the inside on Mott, but Mott closes that door. So while he has lost the overall lead, he is still ahead of his competitor of Slokey, as I believe we may have had a little bit of contact between cars just behind. Mott getting a lot of that curb, slowing him down on the exit. That will put him under attack from Slokey, but Darnell also joining this fight. Looked like he was going to make it 3 wide as Darnell gets off, caught in the grass, and Darnell is off the track. Contact with the wall on the right-hand side. Mott gets 2 tires into the dirt. It looked like he was going to be slow out of the corner, but still holds on to the lead somehow. But Darnell going to be dropping back in positions. I don't see too much damage on the front of that car, but I would imagine that he has some. Busch, your overall leader, ahead of Harrell. 2 GT2s leading the field with 2 GT3s leading the field. Mikey and that Mercedes trying to get past the battling GT3s here as we come across the line to finish our first lap. Busch with Harrell in tow. Mott looking to defend against Slokey. Slokey looking for a move on the inside, will not be close enough. And Mott will take the advantage, as now Slokey look to be under attack from Mikey trying to move past. And now Mott looking to open up the gap. Further back down the field, as we have Norman off the track on the right-hand side there. Merkel in the lone GT. Actually, Merkel was a late join. He is in a Porsche GT3. We have Breakfast in the GT2 Porsche, as he goes on to the grass on the inside. That will slow him down a lot, and he is going to be at a disadvantage under attack from those cars moving through behind him. He will go defensive on the inside of the chicane here, try to defend his position, but jumping across the exit curb there. Busch still your leader in GT2. Mott still your leader in GT3. As Mott will try to just run away from Slokey. He does not want to fight him, as that will bring the rest of the field behind in closer proximity. Busch trying to run away from Harrell. Harrell trying to just stay in the slipstream. But I don't think Busch is making that an easy task. Harrell already nearly out of the slipstream. We'll see as the timing comes, or the timing updates as they come across the line. Harrell right at 9/10 of a second behind Busch. That is going to be right at the edge of the slipstream, and I don't think Harrell will be getting much benefit from it. Mikey now taking the position away from Slokey. That will put Slokey at a disadvantage, and Slokey looks to be dropping down the overall order as some of these GT2s go to cycle through, and Darnell also taking advantage of Slokey getting put off of the racing line, and Darnell moves up into P2 here in the GT3 class. Darnell getting a little squirrely on the exit as Slokey will slot in behind, as GT2s are definitely cycling their way through the field. Darnell with a poor exit on the chicane. They'll be side by side as they head down to the second chicane down the hill. Darnell lost the car previously right here, does not lose it this time, but it's forced to the suboptimal line as Slokey moves to the inside and reclaims the position. Trying to slot in behind Daharo, get a little bit of a tow to try and run away from Darnell. But Mott loving every bit of it. The GT2's helping him out a lot as they are displacing his GT3 traffic, his GT3 competitors, and he is in a league of his own with the GT2s all around, and he will gladly let those GT2s by as they have already done their service to him. Contact with drivers, Moreira and car number 31 of Morton. Morton with some damage on the front of that car. It looked like we maybe had a big incident at the back of the field here, but I do not believe so. Starting with car number 69, the mid-pack train is going a very long way back. Van Wyck leading this train with Ditto in tow, Merkel, Cook, Norman, all these drivers in one spot on track. And then back on board with the leading pack, Daharo leading that pack as some of the GT2 field starts to break away. That first chicane on the track there showing to maybe be a little bit of a trouble spot for these drivers, as it's either make or break the move there. As Slokey comes through the second chicane just ahead of Darnell. And Bush, your overall leader, has pulled a nice gap to Harrell. Mott seems to be closing in on Harrell and looking to take that position back, but he is in no hurry whatsoever. He is perfectly fine just lapping on his own, as he knows that the cars behind him, the next cars in his class, are battling to the death here. Slokey and Darnell in a field of GT2s all around. They are both fighting for position. Hopping on with Davis is Winter, giving Davis some flashers. Maybe Winter not as happy with Davis as he would like to be. Flatman following just behind. As Jennings, a car around one of the GT2s, one of the KTM GT2s, backwards on the track. As he gets that car set back the right way, that will demote him to the back of the field. And the newcomer Pilon Tassa with a little bit of damage on the front of that McLaren. Your leader's definitely broken away from the rest of the field. Mikey, Harrell, and then Mott just behind. Mott closing the gap on Harrell. But once again, it is not a fight for position, so Mott will be perfectly fine, just letting him lap at his own pace, and if he catches him, he catches him. If not. Mikey on his own in a little bit of a no man's land between the lead pack and the, I would say, podium pack, as it is comprising the GT3 podium there, as they have the rest of the GT4 field or the GT2 field in tow. Two battling GT3s at the front of a full 4-car field of GT2s. Actually, I say 4 cars, it is 4 cars, but there's a couple more Audis at the back end of that field. And those drivers just continuing on. The GT2s trying to make their way past these GT3s, Slokey and Darnell. I'm not sure what kind of damage Darnell has to that GTR there, as he did make some pretty hard contact into the wall. But still trying to get the position away from Slokey. Let's go ahead and hop on board with Eggy leading a small pack towards the back of the field. Rowan with some damage on the front of that Mercedes GT2. And Poplinski in that seemingly Deadpool liveried Mercedes GT2. Damage on the front of it as well. Darnell off track, making a mistake. And it seems to be that is maybe giving him a little bit of handling issue, or maybe some handling issue from the damage, but that has allowed Slokey to be on his own and to push forward to try and catch up to Mott, who is ahead, but just holding station behind Harrell. But now the no man's land is there, and Slokey has room to push. Car number 51 of Kelta. Sorry, it's 51 of Davis. Backwards, letting the field come through as he is stopped on the outside of that long left-hander after the first chicane. And he will park that car for now. Jennings with some damage now coming out of the pit lane. Morton at the back of the field with damage on that Ferrari. See that glowing exhaust pulling away in the distance. The field seems to have sorted itself out pretty nice. Mott still trying to run down Harrell, and Mikey with Slokey getting ever so much closer. But Slokey also with that GT2 field behind that is also getting closer. And Darnell not out of the fight yet. He is still within a close enough distance that he could be on for the move as they head down to the start-finish line. Slokey makes a mistake, and now Darnell side by side with Slokey once again trying it around the outside. He will have the inside as they come through the final corner of the chicane. They make a little bit of contact there, it looked like. And Darnell with making contact with Wagner. Darnell is backwards. Darnell tried to move beside, I guess maybe didn't see Wagner coming by him on the outside, or trying to get just right beside him. Wagner, a little bit of damage on the front of that car, but Darnell was faced backwards. Will have to redo it all over again. It seems that he got that car turned back around pretty nice. I believe he didn't let it die, which was crucial into not losing much time, as you would have to get it stopped to restart that car. But now Darnell dropping down the order. A lot more work to do than he had previously. Still on the GT3 podium, but it has not been very easy for him so far. Alarcon in a land of his own in P12 in P12 overall, but P4 in GT3 as the majority of the GT2s are taking up the top 10 positions. But Alarcon now in a position to push. He has a group in front of him that he can get onto the back of and try and use their slipstream and close the gap to those GT3s ahead. And he is in a good position to just not make any mistakes and drive his own race. Craters also in that no man's land just behind Alarcon, as he is the P5 GT3 car currently. Ditto also making his way into that no man's land, but he is leading a bigger pack of GT3 cars, and Saba with some damage on that car as Schmidt goes around in front of him. Saba started at the back of the pack. He is moving up the order in GT3. He's got a little bit of damage on that car. Not sure how that is affecting his performance, but he is up into, I believe, P7 or P8. P16 overall. Let me check the timetables and see what his overall position is currently. Saba up into P8 in GT3. And he is, I believe, showing some great pace. Saba's lap time's a 30.4. Not the 28s that we saw from Mott earlier, but still a good lap time. Could be due in part to that damage, but he is not one to be counted out just yet, as we are approaching the halfway point of this race here in about a minute and a half. Harrell still ahead of Mott. Just cruising behind. Not too worried about getting that position back. But Mikey now under attack from Harvey in the Audi. This is for the final spot on the GT2 podium. The front two spots are all but secured. Granted that they don't make any mistakes, but Harvey now looking to make a move on Mikey for the final spot on the GT2 podium. Slokey now once again on his own once again, with some GT2 traffic looking to make their way up to him. Bird just behind Wagner, both Maseratis. Those drivers who have a little bit of experience from the Wednesday Maserati series. Wagner making a mistake on the exit of the chicane that will almost allow Bird access to a look for the move. Bird not close enough yet. It would have to be a dive bomb into the acute right-hander, and he thinks better of it just to tuck behind and maybe have a move down into the penultimate corners, the final chicane. Harvey all over the rear bumper of Mikey as he is trying to get that final spot on the podium. Mikey not doing too much to try and break the toe, but Harvey now all over the rear bumper of Mikey. Mikey getting a better exit of turn one there. But Harvey eyeing the inside as Mikey goes wide, and they will be side by side coming through turn two. They make a little bit of contact, a hip check from Harvey onto Mikey. Mikey gets two tires in the grass, but Harvey also gets two tires in the grass on the inside, and that will open the door for Mikey to get this position back. As I think Harvey is giving Mikey the position back, and Slokey completely cutting the chicane, diving through the inside and giving those positions back. I think he was just trying to clear the traffic there and not get in the way of the battle. But Mikey back ahead of Harvey as Harvey gave the position back. He felt it was an unfair move. And now Harvey has all the work to do once again. Rowan and Moreira not battling in class, but battling on track, very close to each other there. As Moreira goes off, that will concede the position to Rowan. Rowan with a lot of damage on the front of that Mercedes, though. Saba still moving up the order, looking to work on Merc here, throwing big sparks out of the bottom of that Lamborghini as they head down into the tight right-hander that gets them pointed back towards the front of the field. Merkel with a dive bomb on Kelta into that corner, as well as Flatman is off the track on the right-hand side, off into the grass. He got it rejoined back on the track, but unfortunate for him. Now under attack from Schmidt. Saba looking to move forward on Ditto here down into turn one, carrying a lot more speed than Ditto, as he has a nose on the inside, will have a look for the move, and pushing the other car wide like that will pretty much always give it to you. It is very hard to get that move done around the outside, almost impossible. Seems to be that as soon as the driver gets that inside line there at turn two, that the move is all but done. Harvey now ahead of Mikey, legitimately this time, as now Mikey is under attack from Slokey, and there is a long line of cars queued up behind, two GT2s with Darnell in tow. Slokey still P2 in GT3, but Darnell, driver with all the bad luck tonight so far, is not out of this fight yet. He is still on the GT3 podium, but he wants to move up another spot. And then about 12 seconds behind, car number 69, we've got a car off track at the chicane. Is Van Wyck, as we see his headlights there on the left-hand side of the track as he is re-entering the course. Maybe. Going for a little bit of landscaping first. before he re-enters, but re-entering ahead of Daharo as Daharo goes down the inside for that move as they nearly make contact again. And Daharo is now ahead of Van Wyck as Moreira is eyeing the move here as well. Moreira getting a little bit sketchy on the exit of the chicane there. 2/3 of the way through this race, or I would say right about 2/3 of the way through, as Busch is now coming across some lap traffic of Baum as Baum completely dives out of the way. Now Busch on the inside of Baum making his way past. Now we start to deal with the topic of traffic as Harrell is quite a few seconds behind with Mott in tow, and then quite a few seconds behind them is Harvey with Mikey, Slokey, and Darnell in tow. Slokey and Darnell now battling once more as Slokey had the advantage, but a couple mistakes have brought Darnell back into this fight. Move will not happen here as Slokey has the advantage of the inside line. Darnell will just have to back out and wait once more. That move is not possible around the outside, as now they head down towards the first chicane of the lap. Slokey, as Darnell looks like he was maybe going for a dive bomb move there, but backing out of that move and just tucking behind Slokey. Slokey getting a little bit lenient with that first chicane. Much better here on the second chicane this time. But Darnell trying to hold down Godzilla here, as it seems to be he is having a little bit of trouble getting the power down. Harvey and Mikey here back in battle. It looked like Harvey had all but pulled away from Mikey. And now as they are moving on to the back of some lap traffic, Harvey is saying, get out of the way, as Harvey loses it on his own. Contact with Mikey. Both of the GT2 both of the drivers that were fighting for the GT2 podium make contact with each other. Harvey loses it on its own, but Mikey makes contact with him, and now Bird finds his way into the podium position here. Both of those drivers took each other out, which is part of the luck factor. Bird didn't really have anything to do with that, but he will do everything he can to take advantage of it. Darnell and Slokey side by side on the exit of turn 2 as they head down into turn 3. Darnell will have the advantage, but will not get a better exit than Slokey. Slokey now takes that fight back, takes that position back. I say that not quite yet, as they are side by side down into the chicane. As I said earlier, there's not enough room for two cars, but they will try it. Darnell getting that car completely sideways, having to countersteer to keep that car straight. Slokey now at a disadvantage. Bird has found his way between those two drivers, and now Slokey trying to get past Bird, as Darnell now is in the perfect position to run away. Darnell up into P2 in GT3. Slokey now gets past Bird. Bird will now have that GT2 fight behind him as well. Mott still on his own, as they have lapped some more traffic. Darnell with Slokey just behind, but once again, like I said earlier, Darnell just seems to be having some issues getting the power down in that GTR, trying to pin down Godzilla, as Darnell all over the curves. Still, the question maybe, is that the byproduct of the damage early on in the race, or is it part of the setup? Maybe the car just does not like this track too much, as Darnell still trying to hold on to P2 in class. Slokey doing everything he can to get that position back. And Bird now trying to pull away from Harvey, the GT2 that spun at the final chicane. just trying to get that position back, get back onto the podium. It's a line of cars now, 2 battles for 2 spots on the podium. Darnell and Slokey battling for who gets to be where on the podium. Harvey and Mikey fighting for who gets to be on the, or actually it's not Harvey and Mikey, Harvey and Bird fighting for who gets to be on the podium. Bird ahead of Harvey, but Harvey has the pace. Bird was there to capitalize on the mistake, but does he have the pace to hold on to it as Slokey goes wide at the chicane and Darnell is able to run away with that position? That all but takes Slokey out of the question for that final spot, or for the second spot on the podium in GT3, as he will now be relegated to the final spot on the podium. Now the fight goes back to Harvey and Bird. Bird ahead of Harvey, trying to get that position back as Harvey lost it on the chicane a couple laps ago. Bird was in the position to capitalize, but now Bird has to hold on to that position. Alarcon and Saba. Saba, I believe, actually he is behind by more than half a second, maybe made a mistake. But Saba, starting at the very back of the field, will have to do it all over again in race 2. But moving up the positions, I believe he is in P6 in class now. Yes, I believe he is in P6. Starting at the very back of the field, not qualifying, up into P6 in GT3. A great run from him, but we know that he has the pace to do so. Just needs to have the luck on his side to make it through clean. As you can see, he has had some damage. Just some negotiations with drivers a little bit further ahead. Car number 181 of Harvey. Harvey, big damage to that car. He's going to have to take that to the pits, it looks like, as it seems to have a little bit of trouble driving, but Harvey once again, big contact, losing it on his own. Now Bird on his own up ahead. Mikey getting that position back away from Harvey as he and Harvey made contact earlier, but I don't know if that was a collision on Harvey's own or what, but he has got some serious damage on the front of that Audi now, and I can only imagine that has affected the handling of that car. I don't know if he has gotten a meatball flag for that yet, a damage flag telling him that he has to take it into the pit lane, but it definitely seems to be off the pace now as he is dropping back in positions. Well, those battles seem to have dissolved on their own. Bird ahead of Slokey, as now these drivers are cycling through traffic. Bush all on his lonesome, with Harrell also on his lonesome as they are cycling through some lap traffic. Mott with all but a decisive victory in GT3, showing us that he has the pace to stick it up front. Just has a couple more laps, I believe 2 more laps, to make it around the track in order to secure this win here in race 1. Darnell in P2 in GT3. A hard-fought battle with Slokey, but mistakes all around. But mistakes have lent Darnell now P2 as long as he can keep it clean and bring it home. Bird found his way into, I say found his way, he pretty much fell into P3. It was a mistake from the drivers ahead, and he was just in the right spot at the right time to capitalize. And Bird moved up into P3 here in GT2 for a good podium for him, as long as he can finish. Slokey not going to be close enough to close the gap to Darnell ahead, as mistakes have found him to be on the less favored side of that coin. He can do everything he can to push and try to get that position back, but I do not believe that he is going to have enough time to do so. And hopping on with Alarcon and Saba. Saba now much closer to Alarcon than he was previously. He will have another lap to try and get another position in the GT3 class, as he would be moving up to P4 if he can get past Alarcon, which would be a great finish for him, especially starting at the back of the field. Saba is a driver that is similar to the drivers that we have at the front of the field now, that once he starts at the front of the field, he stays at the front of the field, but a late entry had him misqualifying and he started at the back of the field. Alarcon trying to negotiate past Harvey, who with that damage is way off the pace. Saba maybe trying around the outside as Saba loses the car. Saba's around at the exit of turn 2. That car has, I believe the car had died, but he had to wait for traffic to move by, and Saba will not be improving into P4 as we are now on the final lap, and Busch comes across the line to take the win here for GT2 in race 1. Harrell coming through the final chicane will take P2 in GT2. And Mott, just behind Harrell, will take his first win in this Sunday series, a very decisive win. No one to contest him in GT3. He was able to just pull ahead and take the win. Darnell takes P2 in GT3, and Bird brings home P3 in GT3, rounding off the GT3 podium. Slokey takes home P3, in the GT2 podium. Slokey takes home P3 in the GT3 podium, and then Mikey P4. As the rest of the field cycles through, we'll see if they have any last-second moves between the drivers. Everyone seems to be overall good between each other. Saba moves back past Winter to get a overall position away. Actually, I think Winter gets back ahead. Winter finishes just ahead of Saba. Saba does not get that overall position. It was not for class, but for track position. As Poplinski now coming across the line in that Deadpool liveried car. Eggy, one of the team line members, coming through. I say that doesn't look like Eggy, that looked like a McLaren. Eggy coming through the final chicane. As car number 12 of Norman finishing just ahead. Eggy across the line, and then Pilontasa would have been the next across the line. As they ran in race 1 in GT2, and overall winner Busch in P1, Harrell P2, Bird P3, Mikey P4, Wagner P5, Harvey P6, Winter P7, Poplinski P8, Rowan P9, Breakfast P10, DeHaro P11, Drain P12, Jennings P13, and a late entry from Elizondo. He did not start this race, so he did not finish it, but we will see him at the back of the field in race 2. P1 for the first time in this series, and an astounding P1 for Mott. Very, very decisive victory. No one to contest him. Great win for Mott. P1, Darnell and Slokey, the 2 spots on the podium behind Mott. Those drivers went back and forth the entire time. Darnell ended up finishing ahead of Slokey. Craters P4, Alarcon P5, Ditto P6, Saba P7, Cook P8, Schmidt P9, Flatman P10, Eggy P11, Moreira P12, Merkel P13, Kelta P14, Norman P15, Morton P16, Pilontasa P17, Baum P18, Van Wyck P19, not finishing, I believe, due to damage, and Davis the same for him. As they stand, we are back on the grid. This is race 2, very similar race, but instead of night, we are now in the day. It is going to be a 5 p.m. start, very similar to our qualifying session. And Mott, hoping for similar results to the previous race, he may try to hold on to that lead a little bit more, but he has no reason to. He just needs to keep Slokey behind and Darnell behind. Slokey is going to be the immediate threat. As one thing that happened to Mott, he got a poor start to race 1, and that gave the inside line for turn 2 to Bush and Harrell, who were both able to very quickly move past Mott. Eventually, Mott did get back ahead of Harrell, but it ended up being that, I believe, actually no, Harrell stayed in P2. It was Harvey that was moving forward. Harrell finished P2 behind Bush, but ahead of Mott. And Mott was able to just cruise to victory, negotiate traffic, not have too much of a fuss, and have a very clean win there in race 2. For those of you listening, if you were on track driving, make sure that you stay hydrated like I am right now. Also, thank you for those of you who are tuning in on YouTube. Tends to be the Darnell crew. As we have about 15 seconds before we are engines fired for the second time tonight. As Mott looks to lead the field across the line for the formation lap. As we are engines fired once more.
20 seconds.
And Mott will be leading us on the formation lap. I believe we should actually get our replay camera. I liked this replay camera. Oh man, I done did it again. And as we get back on board with Mott here, if I can, there we go. Very good sound coming out of this Aston Martin. As you see Bush in the mirror just following behind there. Not too much weaving from the GT2s again. I think maybe they did not need so much tire warmth as it is not that technical of a track. And as Mott leads them down towards the first chicane on the course, technically turns 4 and 5. Mott thinking, I just need to get a better restart. It did not lend him a different result than he was expecting. He still won in class, but he does have the pace for the overall victory. Although, with the way the last race went, he was perfectly fine, just cruising on his own, running a safe pace. And he may just go for the same thing on this race. He was able to let the GT2 leaders cycle their way through and run away. He was just following behind, running his race, and was not under much of an attack from Busch and Harrell. And could potentially expect the same thing from Mott this time. It could be that Mott pushes a little bit harder and tries to go for the overall victory, but it does not change the points at all. The finish is still the finish. He still won in his class, which counts as a win for him. As Mott brings the field down to the line, we'll take the green flag for the final time tonight. As green, 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 we are racing here in race 2 of the TRC Sunday GT3 GT2 Multiclass, and Mott once again now getting caught up, but there is a huge incident behind. The entire field is caught up in the incident. It is a huge crash. Huge, huge, huge crash. There's got to be at least 10, 12 cars involved in that incident. From your front runners all the way back down to the midfield. Mott makes it away nicely with Busch in tow, but the rest of the field is still trying to get their way figured out, and there's damage on all of those front-running cars. Huge accident at turn 1 in this series. Extremely rare to see that in this series, and I can only imagine that we're going to see a lot of cars diving off into the pit lane. Some drivers made it through that okay, other drivers made it through there very poorly. Saba seems like he made it through very nicely, and that is going to be huge for him. I don't see hardly any damage on that Lamborghini GT3 as he makes a little bit of contact with Poplinski there. But Slokey getting spun at the very beginning, as well as Harvey. Slokey's got some damage on the rear of that Ferrari. But Saba with a clean car and a ton of traffic out of the way early, as Poplinski, as Harrell is around, or Harvey is around at the acute right-hander. Very, very rough start to this race 2, as we have had an absolutely huge incident, the entire field involved pretty much, as we will see some of those drivers diving into the pit lane, but it has greatly shaken up the rest of the field. Drain taking a nice advantage of that, as well as Bird. Busch and Mott on their own at the very front of the field, as the entire field got caught up in that incident behind, and we have multiple cars diving into the pit lane. Would not be surprised if we see some of those drivers parking those cars tonight. Norman, DeHaro, Craters, Elizondo, actually not Elizondo, but Harrell. Would not be surprised if we see Darnell pulling into the pit lane. He has extreme damage to the front of that Nissan, and that is greatly going to hinder his pace. As for the rest of the field, they either have enough damage to be okay, or are just running it until they have to come into the pit lane. But an extremely poor start to race 2 here. They said that I missed the last big one in the racing last week, as another incident involving car 31, another big incident at the right-hander, 3 or 4 cars involved. Merkel with damage on that car, and it looks like it's having some trouble driving straight, as Merkel goes wide at the final chicane. Eggy into the pit lane. DeHaro into the pit lane. We have some cars just making their way back out on track, servicing that damage and then pulling back ahead, but this has shaken up the entire field. Ditto coming into the pit lane now. Car number 44. I am not sure who that is. If I can find them, that is Saba. Car number 44 of Saba getting off into the grass. He's got a little bit of damage on the front of that car and dropping down the order. I believe the timing boards just need to update. But Busch and Mott both in a great position at the very front of the field. As the rest of the field comes through, these two class leaders able to just drive on their own. Perfectly clean cars were not involved in that lap 1 incident. But Drain now up into P2 with Bird in P3, Wagner in tow. But Davis has found his way up into P2 with Kelta in P3. We will see if those drivers can hold on to those positions, but it would be the miracle that they needed, as they have greatly moved ahead of where they were in race 1. Kelta with a mistake at turn 1 looks to maybe put him under attack from Alarcon, but Moreira, Van Wyck, Rowan, actually Van Wyck and who is that, Norman? I believe Norman may be off the pace, a lap car. Same thing with Craters and Eggy and Daharo. Daharo finally made it out of the pit lane. Eggy still in the pit lane. Ditto still in the pit lane. Unfortunate for all of those drivers involved, but it was an extremely crazy turn of events there at the beginning of race 2. Zolder coming to show that it is not the nicest to these drivers, as Drain and Bird. Bird looking to catch up to Drain. Drain in P2 currently in class. Wagner also looking to close the gap to those drivers up ahead. And hopping on to some of the midfield. Harvey with damage on the front of that Audi, but I believe he thinks it is okay to keep going. Must not be suffering from poor drivability too much, as Schmidt goes off into the sand. Darnell, Baum, and Mikey all trying to regain lost positions. Darnell with heavy damage on the front of that Nissan, as Baum is slow out of turn 1. Darnell looking to follow Schmidt in getting that position away, as Elizondo is also cycling through the field here, starting at the very back, and it looks like he made it through that fuss at the very beginning of the race unscathed. Now looking to move up. Kelta coming into the pit lane. What has happened to Kelta? He was up at the front of the field, now into the pit lane, as he will nearly go a lap down. Car number 87 of Rowan off track at the second chicane, as he is allowing the rest of the field to cycle through. Darnell goes wide at the chicane as well, cuts through the grass, or through the sand I should say. As Busch and Mott on their own once again. Van Wyck around at the final chicane. Car number 269 of Baum will also around at the, or about halfway through the lap, and then brought that car to the pit lane. Pilon Tassa in his first, well, I guess first event, second race with us tonight, also bringing that car to the pit lane. Darnell now bringing that car into the pit lane, as it has some severe damage on the nose of that GTR. I guess the drivability was not there. Car number 727 of Kelta went off track once more, but does have that damage repaired. But the field is completely shaken up from how it finished previously. Busch and Mott both still leading their respective classes. Drain and Bird up into P2 and P3 in GT2. Davis found his way into P2 and GT3. Same with Alarcon, who would be looking for his first podium in this series. His first podium in TRC, I believe. Moreira, if he could close the gap, would also be on for his first podium in this series. But actually, I was going to say he's got a lot of damage on that car, but it does not seem to be hindering him too much. This is the fight for the final spot on the GT3 podium between Alarcon and Moreira. Alarcon holding the inside of turn 1. Moreira getting a poor exit of turn 1 will give Alarcon the advantage, and Alarcon parks it on the apex saying, I'm not giving you the inside line, as Moreira still tries to go after the inside line but is not close enough. Alarcon ahead of Moreira, as this is the fight for the final spot on the GT3 podium. Moreira will be in the slipstream. I wonder how that damage is affecting his top speed. It does not seem to be too much. It seems to be more side damage to that car, which does not greatly affect the pace. Alarcon clambering over the curbs, getting a lot of air on the exit of that first chicane. Then down into the second chicane. Moreira getting a poor entry of that chicane will open the gap to Alarcon slightly. Got to redo that work that he did to close that gap, but it can be done. Cook with Slokey, who is unfortunately caught in that incident early on in the race, from P2 in class. Then